Everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report. Corey and Chad here getting an update from New Pacific Metals, traded on the TSX under the symbol NUAG, and on the NYSE American under the symbol NEWP. We are chatting to the president of New Pacific Metals, Andrew Williams. Now, Andrew just came into that president's role at the beginning of this year and later January. So this is the first time we're having him on the show. We're going to get a little background from Andrew on what brought him to the company and then talk more big picture about some of the key catalysts that are coming later this year. Now, New Pacific Metals focused in Bolivia. The company has 3 projects, one at a PEA stage, another one with a resource estimate coming out, and then another project that is also an exploration play here. So, Andrew, let's start off again with your background. Please give us a little bit of history that you have, especially in the resource sector, and then what drew you to New Pacific Metals, please.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Corey. It's a pleasure to be on the show. As you mentioned, I joined as the company's president. That was in January of this year. So I've been with New Pacific for almost 6 months now. And my last role in the industry before joining New Pacific, I spent 11 years with a institutional investment firm, Sun Valley Gold. Most recently, I was a portfolio manager, and just a fantastic run there. Got to learn the industry. I traveled the world. I think I've been on over close to 100 different site visits. Got to know everyone in the industry and really understand what makes this industry tick. And one of the attributes I came to appreciate in this industry was just how few big discoveries are being made, in particular in the precious metals world. I think if you look back in the 90s, there were 7 or 8 new discoveries, it seemed, of substance and scale that were being made every year. And that number dwindled a little bit in the 2000s decade. And over the last 10 years, in the 2010s decade, very few new discoveries are being made in our industry. And so, from my seat as a portfolio manager covering the entire industry, New Pacific really caught my attention as having made not just one with silver sand, but more recently 2 major discoveries with Corangus now, which we'll talk to, being on the verge of releasing its first resource estimate. But, having 2 discoveries of that size, scale, quality in a company such as New Pacific, that's really what brought it on the radar screen for me and ultimately, prompted the move from buy side into industry.
Well, Andrew, let's dive into one of those 2 discoveries you talked about, and people that have been following along with New Pacific or maybe new to the story would probably appreciate an update on the metrics you put out in 2022 on the PEA that kind of overviews the project. So give us a quick snapshot of this project as it stands today.
Yeah, so the PEA really gave a first taste of what the economics of our flagship silver sand discovery look like. So a 14-year open pit mine life, producing a total of 171 million ounces of silver, all right at surface, low strip ratio, high recovery, high grades. So when the economic numbers came out, $726 million after-tax NPV, 39% IRR, sub 2-year payback, it made intuitive sense why the numbers came out so strong. So I think what's actually important to appreciate about that PEA study is there's an average of 12 million ounces per year of silver production, but in the first 4 years, there's a high-grade starter pit at Silver Sand. So we'll be producing 16 million ounces of silver per year. And just to put that into context for you, silver industry giant Hecla, their silver production guidance this year is 16 to 17 million ounces of silver from 3 primary silver mines combined. And when you look at First Majestic and KER, their silver production guidance is just 10 to 12 million ounces of silver production. So 16 million ounces of silver per year, 12 million ounces per year average over a 14-year mine life. I mean, it really showcases Silver Sand as being the best primary silver discovery of the past decade.
Now, what comes next for Silver Sands? Are you going to be moving into a PFS? Do you have any more drilling to do, or are you pretty much locked into these over 200 million contained ounces? What is the strategy to further advance this asset?
Yeah, so After PEA comes PFS. We've been hard at work on the PFS since the start of the year. We had our PFS QPs come to site a couple months ago, so they've completed their site visits. And so we're tracking to complete the PFS study by December of this year. And then concurrently this year, we're actively engaged in the permit process, which is well underway. So between the PFS and the permitting, that's really taking up the lion's share of our bandwidth internally on the Silver Sand project this year.
Well, and Andrew, maybe just one more comment on the overall disposition the company has as far as advancing these projects. A lot of companies in the industry, and we talked to lots of them, that want to get a project to a certain point, an economic study, a certain milestone, and then put it on the market, shop it around to some of the majors. In talking to you just off mic, it sounds like the direction for this company is you actually want to see this through. You actually want to develop these projects, not just Silver Sands, but also Karangas. So maybe just speak to that you're not just going to put this on the sales rack, but you actually want to build this into a producing company eventually.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I've seen it in my 11 years on the buy side. This strategy where a junior tries to get a project to a certain stage, put lipstick on it, and try and sell it to someone else. I've seen that business model fail too many times. I think what happens is that prospective buyer will, when they look under the hood, see that the hard work hasn't been done and there isn't really much of a company beneath that facade. And the strategy for a company is just to wait another year until the company runs out of money and buy it at a much cheaper price. Or we talk about, you go from $1 down to 30 cents and you get acquired at a 30% premium off 30 cents. So call it 40 cents. You might feel like a hero because you got taken out at a premium, but your shareholders are still wondering what happened from $1 to 40 cents. So I don't like that strategy. I think the better strategy is to proceed as if we were to build these projects ourselves by building the team in the country that can do it. And that's a process that we're actively underway with. And we brought some fantastic people on into the company recently, and we're continuing to grow to support our project development, our permitting, and our government relations functions within the company. And so that way we can, if a company did want to buy us at some point, which, let me be clear, just when I say we want to build it, I'm not saying that we're married to our seats by any stretch of the imagination. We're all large shareholders and want to do what's right for shareholders at large. But I think if when it comes time to say negotiating, if we were to sell the company, we could have a much more credible bargaining position if we can say, well, we don't like your offer. We're going to go ahead and continue to try and build it ourselves here because we can. We just think that's a better business approach. And if the right offer never comes along, then I've seen this playbook several times. Most recently, Lundin Gold's a great example where they put their heads down and acquired a project that was in a less traditional jurisdiction, built the team that could permit it, finance it, build it, ramp it up and operate. And that's just been a great success story. So that's, I think we're going to be in as strong as a position as possible if we do the hard work and we feel like the rewards will come.
Now let's just make sure everyone's on the same page. You're not getting to a construction decision anytime soon, right? You have the PEA out. This is more the big picture strategy because there are a number of stepping stones that you still have in front of you before you even get to a construction decision.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's important to clarify. So as I mentioned before, this year is permitting and PFS at Silver Sand. Next year, we'll make the decision as to whether or not we want to go to a full feasibility study, looking at potentially signing we look at things like investment, fiscal stability agreements, those types of things, lining up project financing. Those would be more 2024 exercises. So we're still a little ways out here before we're ready to press play and start building the project.
All right, Andrew. So some good milestones there for investors to keep their eyes out for over the next 2 years, from the PFS to the permitting and eventually the feasibility study. But let's shift over to the Karangas project. Project number 2 is not a throwaway project. A lot of companies have a flagship and then not much else, but this is quickly growing into a major project for the company. Just in the prior 2 years, you drilled 150 holes here. You've defined a silver horizon that's about 1,000 by 800 meters, and you've just done a ton of drilling in Q1. 17,650 meters, 39 more holes. I guess get us up to speed on what's going on with the Corangus project.
Yeah, so Corangus started out in July 2021 as an exploration concept in a 3,000 meter drill program. As you mentioned, we've now actually put at the end of April altogether 189 holes, 80,000 meters of drilling, and we just continue to be humbled by what we've discovered at Corangus. We think it's a bigger system than what we've discovered at Silver Sand. Corangus is also, it's not just the size of a deposit that can bring it across the line. There's a lot more factors that need to come into play in order for it to be a mine. And one is the geometry, like that silver horizon that you talked about, that kilometer by 800 meter silver horizon close to surface. We think that if you just look at those dimensions from a strip ratio perspective, could be incredibly attractive for an open pit that would then allow you, when you could take out that near surface silver mineralization, there's also a significant gold deposit beneath that you can then mine in the second half of a life. So there's a really nice silver gold discovery that will lend itself very well to open pit mining. And then we've also run some metallurgical tests at Corangus that show that we can recover almost all of the gold. We got 98.5% recoveries with the gold and up to 99% recoveries in the silver horizon. So metallurgically speaking, the geometry at Corangus, and as well, we've got a number of district scale explorational targets that have been highlighted by the geophysical survey. Corangus is very much shaping up to be, a rival or even, potentially surpassing the economic importance of our already fantastic silver sand discovery.
So what other work are you going to be doing here? I know you're working towards this resource that the company has said sometime this year, but sounds like there's still a lot of exploration work. So any insights on what other work will be done here?
Yeah, so we've still got the second, so our Q1 drill program, we've released half of those holes, including an over 200 meter run at 120 grams silver, a step out hole last week we released. And so we've got the second half of those drill results to be released hopefully in the next few weeks. And then that'll be it as far as our drill cutoff goes for our upcoming resource estimate. It'll be the first resource we've released at Corangus that we're targeting late July, early August of this year. And then that resource and the report will inform us as to what additional follow-up drilling is necessary at Corangus. So we'll consider what we need to do to potentially upgrade whatever the resource, if there's inferred, to go to measured and indicated. So there's that element of it. But then there's also, as I mentioned before, we ran a geophysical survey in the first half of this year that highlighted some really interesting anomalies that we're also going to want to drill test in the second half of this year. So, probably not, with 5 rigs like we've been drilling for the last 15 months at Corangus. Maybe we bring back a rig or two for the geophysical anomalies as well as some infill drilling. But then we're also probably, maybe give our guys a day or two's worth of rest once we release the resource estimate. We're going to go hard and get right back into putting a PEA study together for Corangus, hopefully either in the latter stages of this year or early next year. So we'll be in a position, hopefully, where we're at with Silver Sand this year. We're in January. We had a resource and a PEA at Silver Sand. In January, hopefully of next year, we'll be in a similar position at Corangus. We'll have a resource estimate and a PEA study.
Well, and Andrew, another interesting point is that you have these teams that were deployed on Silver Sand on the exploration side that have now moved over to the Corangus project to keep exploring that one. But on the Silver Sand project, you've got teams that are working on permitting and working on the economics and working on that side of things. And those could easily be brought down to the Corangus project. And then we should also mention that in the chamber, you still have a third project, the Silver Strike project, which is more exploration focused, where the team technically could go from Corangus there as Corangus moves along. So maybe just work through, from a team standpoint and culture standpoint, how you're building teams that can continue to incubate and develop projects for the company.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And I think in our industry, we often focus, and for good reason, on just assets, right? Tons, grade, and we're very asset focused. But I think what I've come to appreciate more and more is the importance of of not just looking at the assets, but the company. And that's where, I think you're alluding to. That's the process that we're in now. As a mining enterprise, there are all these multiple phases, whether it's prospecting ground, and then if you find a target, to bring in the drillers and run a drill campaign, and then you can't drill forever. At some point, you gotta complete your permitting assessments, your technical assessments, and at some point you gotta build it, and at some point you gotta operate and close it. And so each one of those phases requires specialized people, and so it's in any business, it's hard to let good people go. If you have really good drillers and exploration folks, it's hard to let them go. And that's why when you have a bigger company such as ours with multiple assets, it gives you that luxury of being able to take great people from one project. So the exploration team from Silver Sand move over to Corangus, which is where they've been, and the fantastic people that helped us make the Silver Sand discovery have now helped us make the Corangus discovery, and perhaps next year, if there's not as much drilling to be done at Corangus, we can move that same team over to Silver Strike and have them work their magic there. And meanwhile, the team that we're building for project advancement and permitting at Silver Sand that are hard at work this year, when we get that project across the line, they'll be trained up and ready to go, and we can move them over to Corangus, and then the cycle continues. And so that's very much the company vision that we're trying to put in place and realize. And that's really how you create that lasting and sustainable value and become an employer of choice. I think just looking at, from my experience as a portfolio manager, I think as an example, Agnico Eagle does a fantastic job of that in the Abitibi, right? They've got some great people and minds in multiple stages of development. And that's, I think, how they've been so successful, moving people around through different phases of projects. And we're trying to replicate that model down in Bolivia.
All right. Well, Andrew, before we get you out of here, in this market where it has been tough to raise money for companies, we do need to ask, what kind of cash does the company have to move forward, especially with the program, the PFS that's underway at Silver Sands, and the resource at Corangus?
Yeah, so we had 11 million US cash and investments at the end of March. And that's enough for us to complete our work plans for this year. So everything that I've talked about, our PFS at Silver Sand, our permitting at Silver Sand, our drilling and our resource at Corangus, our PEA at Corangus, and the like. But for us to go into next year to finish the job of permitting at Silver Sand, as well as potentially release a full feasibility study, and then advancing Corangus into pre-feasibility study permitting, we're going to need to complete a modest top-up at some point between now and the end of the year. So it shouldn't come as a surprise. We're not producing revenue at the moment. So like any junior, yes, we're going to be reliant on these somewhat challenging markets over the next while. But we've got some fantastic cornerstone shareholders, corporates. Silvercorp owns almost 30% of the company. Pan American Silver, our second largest shareholder, own 10%, both very supportive. And so we've got as well some institutions that are supporting the company. So it shouldn't be a problem for us to raise the money that we need to execute on these value creative work plans that we've got in front of us.
All right, Andrew, thank you very much for this update, general overview of your vision and some of the key catalysts for the company moving through the rest of this year. If anybody has any follow-up questions for Andrew or the team over at New Pacific Metals, please email us and we'll get Andrew to address those next time we have him on the show. Thanks again for your time today, Andrew.
Thanks, Corey and Sean. It was a pleasure.